Hello, welcome to episode 15 and Intro to Python. We are going to continue talking about tuples, and today we are going to cover looping through tuples. So we have our tuple here, x. We're going to use a for loop, which we've seen before. We're going to use the variable of I for index and in x, because our tuple is named x. So for index in x, what we want to do is indent here, and we will just simply print the value at whatever index it is. We will open the new terminal and execute. And you see that we get 1, 2, and 3 back. So the other thing you can do is you can just refer to their index number, and we've seen this before, but as a refresher, we will use the range and len functions, or length. So how we do that is we will say for I in range, and the range that we want to pass in to this function is the len of x. And then we do a colon to execute it again. And don't worry if when you're coding, if you get these little red like error messages, just type all of your code first and then see if you have error messages, and then usually that will fix it. And remember, when we're calling the index, we want the square brackets, and then we'll pass in the index number. We'll go ahead and print that, save, run, and you see we get the same desired result. Again, we're able to use a while loop, and when we get to data structures and algorithms, you'll see that stuff in like double pointers. You might also use while loops. They can be very beneficial, so we'll go ahead and cover that really quick. I'm just gonna actually comment out this, and we'll start over. We'll keep the same tuple, that x tuple, and we'll assign a variable I, and we'll give it the integer value of 0, and then we'll make our while loop. We'll say while I is less than the length of x, we want this to run. And remember that if you don't increment or change I to match whatever your operator is here, right? So our goal is to make I eventually a higher integer, or equal to or higher than the value of length x. So if we don't do that, this will just keep running, and we don't want that. And if we decrement it, same thing. So while we're doing that, we want to print x square brackets I, just like you saw above here in the range loop, and then we want to make sure that we're incrementing. So I equals I plus 1, and you can also do the plus equal, remember, here with just 1 instead of the I plus 1. So we can do that, and that will increment it. But we go ahead, we'll save, and we'll execute that. And now just to show you the other method here with the plus equals, make sure you put these in the right order. If you do equal plus, it can be a bad day. Go ahead and save, run that. You see we get the same output. If you do, I'll just show you, it's bad. So if we do equal plus 1 here, if you fat finger it, you see we just get this loop. Again, Control C will just close that for you, but this is what happens when you have an infinite loop here. You can see I'm scrolling up, and you can see it just keeps printing 2 over and over and over and over and over. So we do not want that. So let me go ahead and just change this back, especially if you're taking notes. Make sure you're using the proper operator in the proper order, and then we will move on. Okay, now we're going to talk about joining tuples. And so I've just copy pasted that tuple from above, and then we're going to add another tuple. This will be our second tuple, and we'll just do the simple integer versions of the same thing, 1, 2, 3, and then we'll come down here. We'll say that z equals x plus y, which are our two tuples, and then we will just print z. Go ahead and save that and execute, and you see what it does here. It's essentially concatenating it, but it's just making a new tuple, because remember, they're not mutable. So we're actually just making a new tuple that consists of the two prior tuples added together. You can also multiply tuples, So for example, we can have our tuple up here, we'll ignore y, and we can just have z equal x times 2, and then we'll just print z, save, execute. So now you see it just concatenated basically x twice. So it just put all of x in and then appended all of x again into a new tuple, as you can see. Now, in case you're wondering, don't divide or subtract or you get an error. So you'll get unsupported operand types for tuple and int. So tuple does not support division, and you can't divide a tuple by an integer. So just be aware of that. You also can't subtract in here in this manner. So if you see that, you get the same thing. Okay, I'm just going to grab this tuple and copy it. We're going to cover the tuple methods. Just so you know, there's only 2 methods you can use on a tuple by default, and that is why they take up less memory space than a list. One of the reasons is just because they have less methods inside of their object. So I'm going to add a couple duplicate values in here. So we're going to say 3, 4, 4, capitalized, and then, not that that matters, but we're going to use the count method here. So we'll just hit x.count, as we've seen before. We'll pass in lowercase 3, and we will print that. So we'll come in here, wrap that parentheses, come down here and run it, and you see that we have 2 instances of 3 inside our tuple. If we do 4, we only have 1. Remember, this is case sensitive, and the nice thing about tuples is that they allow those duplicate values. The other thing that we have is we have an index, so I'll actually just do that separately. We'll comment this one out since there's only 2. We'll print, we'll do x.index. Now, index, if you remember, searches for a specified value and it returns the position, so the index of where it was found. So if we type in 3 here, save, and we'll go ahead and print, it does the first one that it runs into. So this is 0, 1, and 2, and it returned 2. So if we do 4 here, lowercase, you see we get 4 for that one, and if we do uppercase 4, we get 5. So just keep that in mind if you have duplicate values, that you will get back the first one that it encounters, depending on how you run through your tuple or how you deal with it. So you might have to separate them out first, and to do that, remember, since these are the only methods that tuples will allow, unless you write some kind of other method that handles it, you might have to convert it into a list to do those list methods on it, and then convert it back into a tuple like we covered in the previous video. Alright, that concludes our basic coverage of tuples in Python. And if you want to go work on the exercises, again, I use the website w3schools.com. It is free. You can run through those exercises. If you have any questions, feel free to comment or message me. And thanks for tuning in. We are moving on to sets.